Hello everyone and welcome to Chat UTD. This is a follow-on video really from yesterday, continuing to talk about the overriding important feature of the club at the moment is whether or not that we're going to part ways with the manager. But I think that is so symbolic of so many other things around the club as well. And it's certainly not the only problem, and it certainly won't solve all the problems if we sack Erik ten Hag. But the fact he hasn't been sacked, I think, is quite alarming. It's not new. It's not something that is exclusive to this situation. It was the same with Louis van Gaal. It was the same with Jose Mourinho. It was the same with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And now it's like this with Erik ten Hag. Ten Hag said apparently yesterday, I saw a quote this morning saying that that we had a bad start last season and we managed to turn it around. And the nail in the coffin was there many months ago for me with Ten Hag. The Coventry semi-final was the time where I thought this is done, and I've not budged on that, and I've not seen anything that suggested I was wrong. But if you ever needed something that's supposed to nail down the coffin even more, it's a statement like that he believes that last season, at the end of the season, or by the end of the season, we had turned it around. It was the worst Premier League finish for Manchester United. We had a negative goal difference. We scored a paltry amount of goals and we conceded more than we scored. We lost 14 games. We didn't get out of a Champions League group, which included Copenhagen and Galatasaray. I can't remember if I said we finished 8th. You know, if that's turning it around, then I mean, we've got the wrong person. I mentioned on Friday what we need at this club is a standard bearer, because no one else is going to do it, and the people at the top of the club aren't going to do it. Ineos aren't going to do it. We thought maybe they might, but they're not, quite clearly. So, like I said on Friday, we need a manager who's an absolute genius. We need to stumble across somebody like that, who, in the absence maybe of being an absolute genius, is a standard bearer, because the standards of this club are absolutely on the floor. If we've got a manager who's still in post, who's overseen a start to the season after 9 games where we're 14th in the league, the stats just add up and up, and I'm not going to go through them all again. I don't need to justify why he needs to go. I think it's beyond debate now. The stats are absolutely shocking, but we're 14th in the league after 9 games. I said yesterday, no top club in Europe would persevere with this. Aston Villa wouldn't persevere with this. You could argue probably Brighton wouldn't persevere with this. Newcastle probably wouldn't. You know, we're not talking about the big hitters here. We're talking about mid-table / upper, perhaps teams that would finish about 6th in the Premier League type teams would not persevere with what's happening at Man United right now. What makes Man United different, that we just blindly stick with managers and hide behind this? It's a 3-year process, it's a 4-year process, it's a 5-year process. No, it's not. I think it was John O'Kane on Twitter today said, and he's quite right, that's nonsense. It doesn't take Conte 3 years to do what he did at Chelsea. Did they win the league within a season or 2 seasons, Conte? I know it went wrong in the end, but he brought success to that team. He put his mark on that team very quickly. Hansi Flick at Barcelona, it's not taking him that amount of time. It doesn't take 3 years to establish a way of playing and put your mark on something if you are a standard bearer. And United fans that are talking about Ferguson and talking about just basically blindly having faith with a manager because it worked once with Sir Alex Ferguson are living in the past. I live in the past to some degree or other, but in a slightly different way. I'm looking at it in a wistful way, in a wishful way, wanting it to still be like that. But what I always hark back to regarding the past is standards. And that, for me, transcends time, supersedes time. It's not about in 1989 or 1994 or 2006. It was a different time and place then. So you can't have the same standards as then, as then now. Standards are standards, whatever the era is. life changes, sport changes, football changes, but I'll tell you one thing that doesn't. Every single successful team, business, every single successful entity in the world, no matter what era it's from, has high standards. So that comes with that's boxing, that's basketball, that's rugby, that's cricket, that's lacrosse, that's football, that's business, that's whatever. And that's in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and now. Having strong, firm standards is a prerequisite to be successful whenever and whatever you're doing. And this club's standards are absolutely on the floor. And a manager coming out and saying, we turned it around last season, is indicative of that. What we're starting to see now is people that have always been very supportive of Ten Hag are now starting to accept that the end is nigh. I remember when Solskjaer was about to be sacked, and Andy Mitten said something that really stuck with me. He said, when the moderates start accepting it's over, it really is over. The people that aren't shouting from the rooftops one way or another, when they start to say, actually, it's time for him to go, the guy's got no support left. The way it's expressed, obviously, is different from those people. They're not shouting from the rooftops. They're not going mental and being horrible, and neither am I, by the way. I've always tried to back up what I'm saying as to why he needs to go. The longer he stays, I must say, the more it's hard to like him. Now, that's not his fault. He's becoming a parody of himself, as happens when you've been kept in a job too long. It happened with Van Gaal. It happened to some degree with Mourinho, and it probably happened to Solskjaer. The personality flaws of that manager become more and more apparent because they're struggling, and they start saying ridiculous things like what Ten Hag said yesterday. But what we're seeing now is Mark Goldbridge, who I think just as a point of stubbornness has said he would never beat Ten Hag out, etc. He said yesterday he needs to go. The club needs to make a change. It's not getting any better. You can love, hate, or be somewhere in the middle with him, but he owns a channel that has more than 1 million subscribers, and it's a huge platform in terms of the United fan base. I'm not saying it represents the whole Man United fan base, but it's the biggest Man United channel. Steve Howson, who, as I've said before, not my cup of tea at all, did a video yesterday set with a thumbnail saying Ten Hag will be sacked. It's just a case of when. Again, he looks resigned to that now, and he's in the top red category for me. I think he would never ask for a manager to be sacked. Webby from Webby O'Neill, who never calls for a manager to be sacked. Again, he's not calling for him to be sacked, but he's saying it's done really pretty much. Gary Neville on his podcast yesterday sort of said, without saying it, without explicitly saying it, look, he said it's becoming unbearable. The pressure's becoming unbearable. You can't be 14th. He said as much as he could say without saying it. And again, he in the past has always been very supportive, and even a few weeks ago said after the Aston Villa game that's bought Ten Hag some time, which I don't think was a helpful thing to say. So you've got people now, I think, as I say, that were moderates, that were people that were actually quite supportive of Ten Hag, that are accepting it's done, it's dead in the water, which it has been for some time. And Ineos are paying for the huge mistake they made at the end of last season by not being ready when it was clear that he needed to be sacked. It lacks foresight, it lacks planning, it lacks organisation, it lacks best-in-class mentality, all the things that they supposedly are priding themselves on, and the reasons we should trust them apparently to make Man United great again. They won't make Man United great again. They are a slight improvement on what we've had before. And the way they're handling this situation isn't an improvement on what we've had before. But I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in a more general sense because of the people that they've employed, like Ashworth, Barada in particular, who I think look really smart appointments. Might not work out that way. Could be crap appointments. But on the face of it, they're people I would have gone with as well. And I can see what they're trying to do by bringing in people like that. So I'm not saying they're not an improvement on the Glazers, because I think they probably are. But the way they're handling this is not an improvement on what the Glazers would do at all. They've messed this up royally. And it seems to me that they are more concerned with protecting their own reputation and protecting a decision that was wrong in the summer than what's best for the club. And that's a really, really dangerous mentality to have. Businessmen, rich people have big egos. And if your ego is more important than the business that you're running, especially when that business is Manchester United and means the world to so many people, then that is a very worrying sign. They probably don't want to pay the 17 million quid or whatever that they have to pay as well to get rid of him. And that's why we're looking at a manager market that is underwhelming, to say the least. People are getting excited about the prospect of Xavi coming and managing Man United. We're at a point now where anything really probably would be better than what we've got right now, because it just needs a fresh pair of eyes looking at it, and it needs some life being breathed into it. But people forget, United did this with Ollie. They put Carrick in charge and then they gave it Ranić. The Ranić as a consultant idea was a great idea. The Ranić as a manager idea failed massively. And probably they'd have been, I don't think Carrick wanted it, but they'd probably been better off trying to convince Carrick to take it for the rest of the season. So, and we didn't get any bounce from Ranić whatsoever. The season just continued to falter. So I'm not saying we sack Ten Hag and everything's going to be hunky-dory and we suddenly have a great season. What they do after that is very important as well. And what I've seen from them so far means that I've got no faith that even if they make the decision, which would be the right decision to make, that they're going to do the right thing moving forward. They made a mistake in the summer, but I think personally for me, I admire people that are able to go, I made a mistake. We're going to look like idiots here because by sacking him, we're admitting we made a mistake. But that's for the greater good of the club, that you can't keep this going anymore. And you can point to a hard luck story yesterday, but he ain't got a leg to stand on anymore because of all the other statistics that are not about a hard luck story that are shameful to be associated with Manchester United. Did someone say, and again I might have got this wrong, 11 Premier League wins in 11 months? We're winning one game a month. I know there's the summer to take into account, but the statistics are so damning. And this is over a prolonged period of time. This isn't a bad start to the season. Just this start to the season would be enough to bring a manager under pressure at a top club, or an Aston Villa or a Brighton, as I mentioned before. But they had the worst end to the season in the last 13 games of last season, and they've had the worst start to the season at the start of this season. This season's start is worse than last season's, which I said yesterday. Last season was an absolute unmitigated disaster in the league, and we made a worse start this season. The majority of this season, we've had players that have been, the whole squad's been there. He's got more players that he wants. There's no excuses anymore. He doesn't, like I said yesterday, he doesn't invest in youth. Doesn't have an injury crisis or injured players, and he thinks, right, how can I make a win out of a loss here? I can bring in a young player, give him his head. The fans will back. If you want any good PR as a Man United manager, give young players a chance. He doesn't do it. So it's over. It's been over for a long time. But my main point today is that word, standards. As I said, it supersedes any era. It doesn't matter what business you're in or football or sport you're in. Every single winning mentality, business, sports team, whatever, has to have standards that are high. And 14th and some of the tripe that he's coming out with it's not good enough. It's not good enough for a club like Man United. So is Xavi the person to come in and start demanding those standards? I would say probably not. Van Nistelrooy's already there and is guilty by association. I don't think he'll be shrinking in the background. I think he'll be getting his two penny within, and the team's still not doing it. And he's not, maybe he's not influential enough. I don't know, but I would think Van Nistelrooy is quite. I love Van Nistelrooy. He's one of my favourite United players to have worn our shirt. I adore the guy. But I would also, and I quite like this about him. I think he's quite arrogant. He's strong-minded. He will not put up with any crap. He probably is a standard bearer, but he's in the dressing room now, and those standards are not being adhered to. So that concerns me. Maybe it would be different if he got the job on a temporary basis. Eden Terzic, is it? Who was at Dortmund? I don't know enough about him. Is he a standard bearer? Don't know. Amorim, they're not going to pay out compensation to get a guy out of a club, because the United just don't do that anymore, because we're not best in class. Like I said many times, we need a full takeover to be best in class. So you solve one problem by sacking him, but it doesn't by any means guarantee a huge upturn, unfortunately. So as I said a few weeks ago, stuck. Okay, there we go. I'll keep checking to see what's going on today. I don't expect to hear anything. I don't expect him to be sacked. I think this will carry on, and I think the longer it does, Ineos are becoming more and more hypocritical about what they told us they were in the first place. Glazers out.